Hello everyone, welcome back to the Age of Warhammer. I'm Valhamma, here today with the Codex and Army cards from the new Cadia Stands box, the new Astra Militarum release. As I said in the unboxing video, I'm really excited to get into these books. I've been a Guard player on and off for 22 years now. They're my very first army when I got into the hobby back in 2000. There's a lot to love about this book, there's a lot that I'm not so sure about. We'll go through it when I get into the book itself. I think overall Guard players are going to be happy. I think there's a lot of really cool changes. I think there's a lot of very good changes. There's a lot of very nice rules combinations you can go for. It does give you a lot of flexibility. There are some omissions in the book. Some things have been cut unit-wise that I'm a little bit disappointed about. And the biggest disappointment I have is that we haven't got the kind of platoon company organisation structure we saw in the 5th edition Codex, which for me is still the gold standard of army building for Guard. I would have loved to have seen that come back. I kind of understand why it hasn't, but it is a bit of a disappointment for me. Without further ado, we'll get into it. We'll start with the cards and move into the Codex, so if you want to skip forward by about a couple of minutes, then you'll get to the meat of the Codex. See you back in a minute. So the cards themselves, there's not really much to say about them. Fairly standard box you get with all of them. Codex cover art on the front, Catachan art on the back, so that's the full image. You can't really see it on this one, but I'll show you in the Codex, it's in there as well, of the Catachans fighting the demons. Really nice piece of artwork. The contents of this are exactly what you'd expect them to be. You've got your stratagems. There's quite a lot of stratagems, as you'd expect for a 9th edition Codex. So that is your stratagem stack. It's about half the pack in total. Then you've got your regimental orders, your prefectus orders from your commissars, and your mechanized orders from your tank commanders. These I think will be really handy just as a way of kind of remembering what each of them does. Stick them by the unit you give the order to, and yeah, just use it as a reference point. You've then got your psychic powers, so Smite, and then the Psychana discipline, which we'll get into in the Codex itself. And then your core stratagems as well. So nothing too unexpected out of these. The standard print quality, they're really nice. And yeah, I think they'll be as useful as any of the other army cards, really. The benefit of these over a kind of just being a stratagem deck, I guess, would be the orders. Having access to those that you can put down on the table and remember kind of which unit has what and what they do. I can see being really helpful as a gaming aid. I'll certainly be using them. I think they're a really nice little addition. But now onto the Codex, the bit everyone's excited for. Right, everybody, the Codex itself, the Codex Astra Militarum for 9th edition, the Imperial Guard Codex, going into the era Indomitus again, I guess. They've had an 8th edition Codex. This is the limited edition one you get in Cadia Stands. It's the soft touch cover. It's got the really nice art of Lord Solar Leonotus on the front. And on the back you've got the same Baneblade art that we've seen elsewhere. Sorry, not Baneblade, Rogal Dawn art. I really love this cover. I think it's stunning. All of the art for 9th edition has been brilliant, and this just continues that theme really nicely. Cracking it open then, standard interior cover there. Nice little front page with Cadian, Valhallan and Catachan art, and a bit of flavour text. The contents now. Hopefully you can all see this okay. Anyone that has played Guard a while will recognise there are some missing units in the rules section here. So we have lost company command squads, we've lost conscripts, Weird Vein Psychers are gone. There's quite a few units that haven't made the cut into this book. For the most part, I understand why things like the Weird Vein Psycho models were getting quite old. They were a 5th edition metal model. The Command Squad one we'll come to when I talk about the army construction, but I feel like that's a bit of a shame. But overall, a really good selection of units. You know, it's 100 pages of rules, give or take, including the Crusader rules and things like that. So you're chock full of content. You're not going to be missing. You're not going to feel like this book is light in content in any way, shape, or form. In terms of the first section, so the first 40 pages or so are basically the fluff and lore. Beautiful pages. This the new Cadian artwork we saw on the Cadia Stands box in full. You've got some of the old art recycled and up coloured, so that's the old Vostroyan command art. Loads of really cool fluff and flavour text explaining kind of the state of the Imperial Guard across 9th edition, across the era Indomitus, the effect of the Great Rift, how it kind of cut off a lot of the supply lines the Imperial Guard rely on, a few kind of key war theatres and where the Rift currently stands for them, including some of these like little outlying sections of Rift that have broken through, highlighting kind of where there have been significant victories, where there are fortresses for each segmentum. So obviously Terra and Mars for Solar, Hydrafer for Pacificus, Cardiniash for Imperium Nihilus. So yeah, it's nice to see them kind of expand out on where these kind of key bastions of the Imperium currently stand, as well as major war zones, so Vigilus, Armageddon. They are named down the side as well here. There's some cool little bits of flavour text about who they're fighting and why. Really nice update to the galactic map. I'm sure there'll be some hidden little bits kind of sequestered in here that I've not yet spotted. Things like the Tau 5th Spirit expansion on the other side of the rift here. Just nice things you could base a campaign around or base an army around if you really wanted to. Carrying on, goes into the Fall of Cadia and a bit about Ursula Creed, Creed's daughter. I think it's a really cool idea to continue that line. I know some people weren't happy without it, but it makes sense. Like, if you have a famed military family, they tend to be generational, so you know it's cool to see that continue. It does talk about the Fall of Cadia. It does also say that the Cadian 8th were not evacuated from Cadia. The Cadian 8th, Creed's own, seemingly were destroyed during the Fall of Cadia, which I think is interesting. A bit about the era Indomitus and about who Lord Solar is. I know some people got a bit uppity that a new character was introduced with no background, no flavour text, no book. I mean, that was kind of the standard for years gone by. When the 5th edition Codex dropped, we ended up with things like Veteran Sergeant Bastone, Knight Commander Pask. They only had the fluff that came in the Codex. That wasn't unusual, and it seems like they've gone back to that a bit with Lord Solar. Like, it might seem like he's arrived with absolutely no kind of preempting or fanfare, but that's the way it used to be. And it's cool to see, you know, a replacement and an update for Saint Macarius, and Saint Macarius is mentioned in here as being kind of the predecessor to Leontus, and he sees him very much as a spiritual predecessor to his own kind of military career, which is very cool. Highlights that there are 5 Lord Solars in total, or Lord Commanders in total. He's just Lord Solar. There is obviously Lord Pacificus and all the others as well. Sadly, no options to build a custom Lord Commander in the book, but you know, we'll take what we can get. Bit delving into another beautiful piece of art here about you know, the Imperial Preacher leading the Cadians in battle against seemingly the arch enemy. Looks like Chaos Space Marine down the bottom right there with an assault cannon. So yeah, a bit about the structure of the Imperial Guard, combined arms regiments. There's some really cool stuff in here about how the Department Militarum kind of smash together understrength regiments with mixed effects, and sometimes it works brilliantly. In the case of the Catachans and the Elysians, who become kind of expert mobile jungle warfare operatives, and where it doesn't work so well, where an infantry regiment was combined with a recon armoured division, and the troops were sent into battle hanging off the back of scout vehicles that didn't really work too well. Bit about the Death World, so covers off the Catachans. Most of it's stuff that we've seen before. I don't think there's too much that's introduced that's new here. It does go into a bit about Warzone Catachan, and this is the artwork I've been talking about, the full Catachan spread. So the very, very angry Catachan lass there, bolter arm guy there, and then some blood letters in the background. Very atmospheric, very grim, very cool piece of art to add to the collection. It covers off a bit about the strength of the Catachan, so you've got airborne mechanized regiments, armoured regiments, infantry, and says a bit about kind of their way of war. Into the mechanized infantry, I mean, you can't really talk about mechanized infantry without talking about Talon and Armageddon, and both of these get a mention. Siege and artillery talks about the Krieg, as you'd expect, as well as a few other bits and pieces in here, so Baron Siege Masters, the Torquati Maya Dredgers. So some nice little kind of hints and tips about possible regiments you could build or convert yourself. Sabbath Worlds, one of the longest running Black Library series, and with good reason. These books are incredible. If you haven't read them, I highly recommend them. The story of Gaunt's Own and the First and Only is brilliant, full of exciting kind of battle scenes, really emotional sequences, some really deep, interesting characters. And they do now have full rules. So the plastic kit for Gaunt's Ghost that released a while ago, they have full rules in this book as well, so they are deployable onto the table. A bit about infantry regiments, the kind of the backbone of the Guard, as it were. This is the primary strength of the Imperial Guard, its ability to throw hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of troops into various war zones and just absorb the losses. Armoured regiments, always a fan favourite. You can build very comfortably in a 2,000 point list a full armoured company with this book. And it actually works out to almost exactly 100 power as well. A tank commander, 9 Lehman Russes, and 3 Sentinels is exactly 100 power. So you can do a properly deployed armoured company for a Crusade force or for a Tempest of War army, which is really cool. The Scions do have a mention in here. They are very much, I don't want to say an afterthought, but they're very much slimmed down. They're just kind of a small section at the back. You can build a full Scion army, and the Scions do become troops if you do that, so you can use the battalion detachment or patrol detachment, but they are very much a secondary element of this book. Commissars are mentioned here as well. Obviously, they're trained in the Prefecto, the Officio Prefectus, same as the Scions, so they get a mention in there as well. A couple of the war zones, Warzone Armageddon. I'll admit I've not had a chance to fully digest all the stuff that's in here for these, but it's always nice to see kind of the background of who's fighting, where they're fighting, and what the fighting is doing at the moment. On to the more controversial one. Yarrick has died. Yarrick is dead. I'm waiting to see if he does die fighting Angron, and if that little head that's on his necklace is in fact Yarrick. But yes, he has fallen. He is no more. Nice little one-page though to give him his rest and put the venerable character into legend. Into the kind of the colour plates and the gallery. I won't spend too long lingering on this, but just to give you a sense of what's in it. Various kind of regiment colour schemes. The Cadians obviously feature quite prominently, being the new models, as well as the old models. The new Rogel Dawn tank is absolutely stunning. I can't wait to build one of these for myself at some point. Various command squads. You've got urban warfare camo schemes you can take inspiration from. These are the Kaskin models, as you can see here. In an urban scheme. The Attillans. What has become quite clear looking at the Codex, the Attilan Rough Riders, I think these would be really convertible. I think they only really need a head swap and you could take them out of being Attillans into any regiment you wanted. They're wearing kind of greatcoats and light armour, but like the head is the bit that's so typically Attilan, and I think just a simple head swap, you could have Krieg, you could have Valhallan, Vostroyan. I don't think it'd be too much of an ask to convert those over. A nice little bit of the Kaschans and Deathcore at the bottom as well, and then the Lord Solar himself gets a double-page spread. Ursula Creed at the bottom there with her various options with the helmet and the scepter. I really like this model. I think it's a really effective way of representing a senior commander. I think she's brilliant. Scions get a couple of pages as well. Bit about their kind of regimental iconography and some of the more common colour schemes. So I think these are the lions, if I remember rightly. And then some nice double page versus the Tyranids. Into the rules, into the meat of the book. The bit that everyone's kind of been most excited for. So, as I said at the beginning, there are some things I think this book is lacking. I think the way that the units they have included feel a little bit scattershot. They've included some new things that perhaps could have been better represented elsewhere, and they've lost things that I feel are quite core to the Guard's kind of ethos. The loss of conscripts, the loss of company command squads does feel a bit weird. So the way it works now, in your HQ section in particular, the only way you can get a senior officer is if they have the Cadian keyword. You've got the Cadian Castellan, Lord Solar, or Ursula Creed. They're the only senior officers in the book. Everything else is a lower officer. The platoon command squad is the only generic command squad that you could take if you wanted to avoid Cadians entirely. That feels like a kind of a weird omission. I don't know why they wouldn't have had an option to either upgrade a platoon command squad to be senior commander. As far as I can tell reading through, there's no option to do that. There's no way of giving them an extra order. So yeah, it's just a bit strange. What I will say though, the detachment abilities are fantastic. So the standard one, Born Soldiers up here, is essentially a combination of a leadership boost and the Hammer of the Emperor rule, so 6s to hit, automatically wound. That's still in here as an option for that. And then the other thing to bear in mind, similar to when the Votan first released, any auto wound, so any rolls of a hit of a 6 to wound that automatically wounds, the wound roll also counts as a 6. Sorry, that wasn't very clear. If you roll a 6 to hit, you count as having rolled a 6 to wound. There aren't many abilities that trigger off that. It's not like with the Magna Rail where you're doing silly damage on a 6 to hit automatically, or if you have judgment tokens on a 4. There's not a huge amount that springs off that 6, so I think it's not going to be as unbalancing in the Guard as it was for the Votan. I think it's an entirely fair rule to have. The interesting one for me is things like the chain of command abilities. So things like your warlord has to be an officer, and it must be your most senior officer available. So if you have Lord Solar, he must be your warlord. If you have Ursula Creed or a commandant, they must be your warlord. If they're not in your army, you must have a command squad that becomes your warlord, and it trickles down in that way. You do have access to a couple other things here as well. So if every unit in your army is either Militarum Tempestus, Officio Prefectus, or Auxilia, which is things like the Valkyries, Scions become troops instead of elite, so that's how you can get your full Scion army. The standard one of troops in detachments gain OBSEC, that's to be expected now, that's not new. And then you have access to, if you don't want to take Born Soldiers, which gives you the Born Soldiers keyword, you can use your officer's leadership characteristic within 6 of that unit, and 6 to hit auto wound. If you don't want to use that one, you do have access to 2 pages of custom doctrines. Now, unlike previous books, these aren't tied to regiments. Regiments are occasionally mentioned, so where they're taking inspiration from. So industrial efficiency is based around the Steel Legions of Armageddon. Swift as the Wind is the Talon one. Veteran Guerrillas, understandably, things like Kaschans. So they do call out regiments where certain traits have come from. Sorry, Brutal Strength is the Kaschan one. But you can combine them in any option, and that's not only to create a mono regiment, so your own custom regiment that's singular, but also if you wanted to do like a combined arms regiment, so say a regiment of Kaschans have been combined with a regiment of Steel Legion, and you wanted to do a mechanized Kaschan style army, you'd probably go with Brutal Strength and mechanized infantry, for example. There's some really cool options here about what you can do. As far as I can see, none of them stack together to get too unbalanced. Things like increasing the range on your weapons by 4 inches, re-rolling 1 hit roll for elite sharpshooters. Like, none of these are going to push you well over kind of the balance threshold, as far as I can tell. I will put my hand up and say I'm not a competitive player. If you want a more competitive analysis, I'd recommend Tabletop Tactics, maybe someone like SN Studios or Winter's SEO. They might be able to give you a more kind of match play view. But in terms of the flavour of Guard regiments you can create with these, it's massive. There's a huge range of possibilities. I think it's something like 93 possible combinations you can do, which is really cool. So no 2 armies have to play alike, basically. Stratagems, yeah, standard 9th edition kind of problem. There are a lot of them. A lot of them are very cool, a lot of them are very interesting. Some of them are tied to specific regiment keywords, some just get better if you have certain regiment keywords. So for example, if you have Vicious Traps, if you are Kaschan, a Veteran Guerrilla, have the Melter Mine keyword, or have Slime Marbo in your army, that stratagem gets more effective. So it plays into a very particular kind of regiment, but is available to anyone. Same with things like artillery strikes. So basically all of these strategic ploy ones are generally tied to either a unit keyword or to a regiment keyword or to a doctrine. And they kind of improve or get better depending on what regiment doctrines you've taken. You've got a couple of the standard ones, so extra warlord traits, extra relics, giving a relic to a sergeant, smoke launchers we've seen from most of the Imperial armies. So yeah, there's some that you'll see more than others, but I think it's just the kind of the overwhelm of stratagems that's getting into the game at the moment. There's a lot of these to try and remember and find a use for. Tank Ace's abilities, I love these. My favourite one is that Steel Commissar brings Commissar tanks back into the game. That's something I've been looking forward to for a very, very long time. I think the idea of Commissar tanks is one of the most 40k things that exists, and being able to put that onto the table now is very cool. These all have a points benefit, points cost either for battle tank units or super heavy units. Sadly, you can't do a super heavy Commissar tank, so you can't recreate the Fortress of Arrogance for your own Commissar. But everything else is available to everyone else. Some are things like an invulnerable save. You can give it an extra doctrine. You can give it effectively transhuman. It's transhuman on a tank. Very, very cool. And then the Psychana discipline. I've not had a full look through these, but I don't tend to take Psychers in my guard armies. I probably will have a Primera Psyker in my new one. So I will have a chance to read through these, but it's a mixture of kind of buffing powers and debuffs on the enemy. So things like being able to give transhuman to a unit, subtracting move and advance and charge rolls on the enemy, a witch firepower, 5-up invulnerable save. So you've got a mixture of kind of blessings and maledictions basically. They all look pretty handy in a pinch. I'm sure that as play goes in, things will kind of steady out into the favourites. But yeah, nice little addition. With the loss of the Weird Vein Psychers, you won't see as many of these, but Primera Psychers are still in the book as a HQ choice. Warlord traits, again, bit of a mixed bag. You've got a melee one, which means that 6 to hit score 2 additional hits, and you add 1 to your attack roll. But it's unmodified 6s, so the +1 to hit doesn't make that 5s. Being able to put stuff into reserve and out of reserve, extra stratagems. I think that will probably be the Grand Strategist. Each time a command point is spent on a 5-up, you get it refunded. That's always a popular choice, especially if you haven't really got much else you want to take. That will probably be the one that most people take. The other one being Lead by Example, where officers can issue orders to themselves. That's a really potent ability. Old Grudges, yeah. If you happen to be close enough to your Warlord, adding 1 to the wound roll is quite handy. That does apply to battle tanks as well, so that one I can see being taken on tank commanders and keeping a Russ battle platoon quite nearby. Getting +1 to wound on battle cannons is no small thing. Or an extra order, fine. So actually, tell a lie, you could, in theory, end up with... No, you can't give an extra order, sorry, so just rereading that one. So you could know an additional type of order, so your command squad could know Prefectus orders, for example, but doesn't let you give out extra orders during the turn. There are some Militarum Tempestus Warlord traits as well. These are all based around kind of close range attacks, as you'd expect for the drop troops. Relics, some cool options here. Again, the mixture of weapons and buffs. Kurov's Aquila, so you can reduce the command point cost. Sorry, increase the command point cost of your opponent's stratagems once per game, excluding command reroll. That's quite handy. If you're playing against Guard and making Transhuman Physiology 2 CP as standard, that's not going to go down well with them. 4-up invulnerable save from the Death Mask of Oleanus. Tell a lie, there is a way you can give an extra order. So if you take the Auto Reliquary of Tiberius, that gives you an extra order for your command squad or officer. So 3 for a senior officer, 2 for a platoon command. A decent pistol, damage 2, strength 4, AP -1, pistol 3, ignores Lookout Sir. So there's a couple of interesting options there. I think the Tactical Auto Reliquary will be kind of my go-to for the extra order, but some cool options built into there. A few other ones. These ones can also quite often be given to sergeants. So you've got things like Alraham's Power Sword from the old Talan model. You've got a banner top. Some interesting options. None of them are particularly kind of must-takes as far as I can tell, but there's some cool options, things like extra commands or just being able to do some damage. Gatekeeper is quite spicy. Replace a Lehman Russ battle cannon with a strength 9 AP -3 damage 3 variant. Yeah, some nice options, some very interesting options. Data sheets. So, a few abilities for the army. Turret weapons, so your Lehman Russes and your Chimeras, things like that. They do get +1 to hit with their turret weapons, so they are still hitting on 3s. However, you can make combats in engagement range, but it is -1 to hit, so you're on 5s for close range shooting. If I've understood that correctly. Must still subtract 1, so you can make engagement range shots, but you're still at the standard -1 for shooting engagement range. Regimental tactics is very cool. Essentially what it means is if you issue an order to a unit, it kind of bubbles out to friendly platoon units within 6. So you only have to issue it to one infantry squad, and it will go to their entire platoon if they're close enough. That's really handy, and I think it kind of overcomes the limitation on orders from platoon command squads. Obviously, a unit still can't be affected by multiple orders, so you do have to pick and choose which ones you want the order to go on to, but it does mean you can effectively order your entire army if you want to. Same with the squadron, so if you do a tank commander order, it can affect friendly squadron units within 6 as well. So you could have your entire tank company receiving the same order off of one commander. Voice of command is basically the orders rule, same name as before. As standard, it's quite short range, it's only 6 inches, but you can use Vox casters to put that out to, I think, 24. Mechanized orders are within 12. Nothing too exciting there. Disembarking Officers is a new one, so Voice of Command is still in the command phase. Obviously that would mean if you are in a transport, your officer can't give orders. However, now if you disembark, you can do it in the movement phase instead. However, the regimental tactics do not apply, so you can't bubble the order, you can only give it to one unit. But if you're doing a mechanized list and you want your Cadian shock troops with 2 melter guns to really put in the work, that's where you could use the order on a unit that disembarked. The orders themselves, first rank fire, second rank fire, the old favourite, that's now changed to lasgun going to heavy 3. I think that's a nice cleanup, it just makes it nice and easy. And also encourages units that are stationary to use it. Before, when it was just kind of an extra shot, you never really got that effect of the front rank taking a knee and the back rank firing over the top. With it being heavy 3, it makes it feel much more cinematic and much more of a static defence. Take aim, +1 to hit and +1 AP, that's going to be quite handy against some armies. Obviously, if you're doing that on guardsmen with AP0 lasguns, your marines aren't going to care, but against things like orcs or Nid Gaunt Beast, things like that, things with low saves, just denying them a save or putting on a 6 is going to be handy. Fixed bayonets, +1 attack, +1 to your attack hit roll and +1 AP in melee. So basically take aim, but for fighting. And again, like hitting on 3s in combat and getting AP -1 on a standard bayonet is no small thing against 6-up saves and 5-up saves. Take cover gives you light cover. If you already have light cover, you get dense cover. That's quite handy, so you get -1 to hit and +1 save. If I've remembered dense cover correctly, I think I have. Move. Increase your movement by 2 inches until the end of your next movement phase. If you make an advance, you don't make a roll, you just add 6 to the advance roll. So your move is +2 and then your advance is a flat 6. So you can get well up the board very early on with that stratagem. That order. Suppression Fire is an interesting one. This is a new one as far as I remember. In your next shooting phase, the first time this unit is selected to shoot, select one enemy infantry unit that's visible to it. You can only attack that unit, even if there are other targets. If you score 5 or more hits against the enemy unit, then until the end of your opponent's next turn, that enemy unit is suppressed. This gives them -1 to their attack hit rolls for shooting and melee. So that's quite handy. It's a nice way of debuffing the enemy with a good range of firepower. I'm quite keen on that one. Perfectus Orders, these are based around the commissars, so it's kind of more leadership-based stuff. You can fall back or advance and still shoot without actions failing. You can shoot or charge in a turn you fall back, but not both. You count as being stationary for your shooting phase if you've moved or advanced. So lots of really interesting stuff there. At all costs is a great one. Gives you objective secured. I can see that being used on Ogryns to give you a nice kind of solid scoring unit, multi-wound scoring unit on an objective. +1 leadership, and then blocking off enemy reinforcements, things like that. Mechanized Orders, these are some of the best ones in the book as far as I'm concerned. Pound them to dust, you double the number of models in the enemy unit to count for blast weapons, so you only need to have 5 models in the enemy unit to get the maximum shots, so Space Marines are going to hate that one. Full throttle, extra movement, gunner's kill on sight, reroll hits of a 1, blitz +1 to charge rolls, and if you have the Dozer Blade attachment, you do D3 mortal wounds on a 4-up in combat. Gain objective secured, and then pinning fire, which is sort of like the suppression fire, but it reduces their movement by 2 instead. On to the datasheets then. We won't dwell fully on these, but just give you a bit of flavour on them. Lord Solar, solid stat line, movement 12, 2 up of a weapon skill, ballistic skill, 8 wounds, which is frankly disgusting. 3 up save base, a 4 up invulnerable save, and halves incoming damage. Knows all 3 order types, can issue up to 3 orders. He is your absolute kind of linchpin paragon commander if you wanted to go that route. Heroic Senior Officer, so you reroll hit rolls of 1 and wound rolls of a 1 within 6 as well. Very capable as a backline buffing unit, very capable as a combat unit as well, with his -3 AP damage 2 sword, hitting on 2s at strength 6. Yeah, he's a pretty potent unit. I can see him being taken quite a lot. At 9 power, he's not cheap. He's the same price as the Leman Russ. I can't remember the points off the top of my head, but he's not cheap. But a very much a unit to build your army around. Ursula Creed, the named senior officer, obviously Usaka's Creed's daughter. Cadian keywords, which keys off some of the stratagems and some of the relics as well. You've got 2 orders per up to 3 orders per command phase. And also you can use the command reroll stratagem twice per phase rather than 1. This I don't think we've seen before, but the ability to gain an extra reroll per phase is quite handy. It does mean you're likely to burn through your CP quite quickly, but such is life. And Senior Officer Aura, so you reroll hit rolls of a 1 within 6 of her as well. Also the option to, when you issue an order until the start of the next command phase, you add 1 to the strength of the attack. So that, combined with things like first rank fire, second rank fire for heavy 3 strength 4 las guns, is quite tasty. I do quite like the idea of that. That does only affect the unit you select. That doesn't affect the units you bubble with regimental tactics though. So it's only 1 unit that can get the buff on that one. Cadian Castellan, this is your only kind of generic senior officer in the book. This is where I think the book starts to fall down a little bit in its variety. I would have liked to have seen a company command squad or a senior officer generic data sheet in here, particularly if you're doing kind of a homebrew regiment. You don't really have much option for a senior commander other than taking a Cadian Castellan and saying he's not a Cadian in your canon, which is it feels a bit of a shame really. It just feels like a missed opportunity. But they are a handy unit. They've got 5 invulnerable save. They can do 2 orders per command phase, and while friendly Militarum units are within 6, you get rerolls of a 1, same as with Ursula Creed as well. Fairly decent stat line, BS and weapon skill 3, strength and toughness 3, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, and a 5 up save basic. A couple of war gear options based around the new plastic kit that's coming out. So they start with a las pistol chainsword, can get bolt gun, power fist, power sword, bolt pistol, plasma pistol. Nothing kind of too exciting there, but it is your kind of senior officer option. And as you can see from the diagram, the picture down here, they can take bodyguards as well. We'll come to that in a minute. Tank Commander, 10 power, has had the weapon skill reduced. Ballistic skill reduced. Ballistic skill is now 4 basic. However, that being said, you do still have +1 to hit on your turret guns. There are orders as well that you can potentially take. Still has the full range of options. All of these weapons seem to have had some sort of glow up. Demolisher cannons, heavy D6 blast turret weapon, damage is D3 + 3. The one that I think has seen the biggest improvement though is the Vanquisher cannon. In the 8th edition Codex, you would never take the Vanquisher. It was never worth taking over a battle cannon. Now, it's potent. It's heavy 1, it's strength 14, AP -5, so even your Space Marines are getting no save. And it's D3 + 6 damage. And on top of that, No invulnerable saves, and you suffer D3 mortal wounds. So it's basically your rail cannon equivalent. It's not dissimilar to the railgun from the Tau list, which is what it should be. It's the anti-tank weapon. It's the primary anti-tank turret of the Imperial Guard. So it's nice to see it live up to that. The fact it can now basically one-shot a vehicle makes it feel much more in keeping with the lore and narrative of the tank. Other than that, you've got things like the Dozer Blade, which allows you to ignore modifiers to move, advance and charge rolls, and the Armoured Keyword, which gives you +1 armor save against damage 1 attack. So you start with a 2-up save basic. The Armoured Tracks just give you some extra protection against damage 1. Does have Voice of Command, does have Regimental Tactics, and you can issue 1 order in the command phase, but if you've got your squadrons close enough together, you can bubble that 1 order across everybody. Platoon Command Squad, this is your only generic command squad. Again, this is where I think the book has kind of missed a trick, losing the company command squad. It's not the end of the world. You could just, my plan is basically to take 1 Castellan as my company commander and 3 of these and run 3 platoons of infantry using the brigade attachment. But yeah, it just feels like it was a bit of an unnecessary loss to lose the company one. Veterans have lost a point of ballistic skill. They're now BS4. So whether we continue to see veterans kind of as pride of place for special weapons or not, I'm not sure. Personally, I think I'd probably just take a heavy weapon on them and leave them behind the infantry squads to put some work in. Voice of Command, Regimental Tactics, and 1 order per command phase. As you say, if this is your Warlord with a relic, you can get it up to a 2nd order. But yeah, if you've got a Castellan, you'd probably just put it on them to give them 3 orders per turn. The Master Vox increases your order range to 24 inches, as I said, but the receiving unit must also have a Vox caster. Medic gives you a 5-up Feel No Pain, effectively. And the Regimental Standard means that you can reroll wound rolls of a 1 within 6, which is quite handy. So if you pair that up with the Castellan for the Senior Officer, you'd have rerolls to hit and wound of a 1. That's quite a nice little touch. Then you have the Cadian Command Squad. So when I did the unboxing, I mentioned that the sprue you get is specifically labelled as the Cadian Command Squad. This is where I think that the current Command Squad will become the standard platoon one. That won't go out of service, but you'll be able to build your kind of standard platoon squad from the current kit. And then the Cadian kit will remain being a very niche kind of Cadian specific one, hence the banner having the Cadian gate on it. Again, it kind of feels like this is unnecessary. I get that the Cadian keyword triggers a few stratagems, but other than that, it's identical to the platoon command squad. It's still only one order per phase. The veteran guardsmen have the same stat lines. The only difference being you can't take a heavy weapon in this. I don't understand the design decision that led to them creating this unit but losing the company command squad, basically. It doesn't feel like it's different enough to justify not having a generic company command squad, to me. But other than that, same unit as before, so I won't go into too much detail on it. Ironhand Strachan is still an absolute boss. He's Strength 6, Toughness 4, 5 wounds, 2-up weapon skill. His bionic arm is AP minus 3, damage 2. Very much a close quarters commander, as you'd expect. He automatically has the close quarters warlord trait, which increases his attacks. He gets double hits on 6s to hit. The shotgun's pretty handy. Assault 3, Strength 4, damage 2. No AP on it though, so Marines are getting a 3-up save, but it is killing a Marine with every failed save. Monster units you can reroll the wound roll against. He has a 4-up invulnerable save from his bionics. Has the reroll to hit roll of a 1 aura from Senior Officer. And then on top of that, whenever he issues an order, to the start of your next command phase, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, unless it's targeting a vehicle, a hit roll of a 6 automatically wounds. So you basically get the Born Soldiers, but for melee against enemies if you're within 6 of him. Primera Psyker, 2 psychic powers and deny 1. No smite and 2 psychic powers from Psychana Discipline. Stat line is pretty mediocre, as you'd expect. He's just a mortal Psyker. The Force Stave is quite handy. Strength 6, AP minus 1, damage D3. Not awful, but you don't really want this guy in combat, to be honest. Perhaps a nice little buffing piece, but definitely not a requirement in any army. Gaunt's Ghosts, again, these are a fixed team, so you get the models in the box basically as set lines. They all have their own stat line with various abilities. their various weapons down here. I mean, Larkin's Long Las is pretty tasty. Strength 5, AP -2, damage 3, ignores Lookout Sir. Wound rolls of a 6 are D3 mortals. Yeah, all in all, I'm not unhappy with this unit. I think they're a really good representation of the ghosts. It'd be really cool to see them on the table a bit more. Bodyguards and attachments. So these give you various buffs. So the Master of Ordnance no longer lets you call down an artillery barrage himself. However, every time you have a friendly artillery model making attacks within 30 inches of him, you can reroll the hit roll of a 1, so he buffs your artillery up. I think he also increases the chances of your stratagem for artillery bombardment going well. Officer of the Fleet, reroll hit rolls of a 1 if you're an Aeronautica Imperialis unit. And Astropaths, you can use them to gain command points, which is quite cool. It's a psychic action, so a nice way of farming command points, which I think the Guard are going to need. I think we'll see them quite a lot in a lot of units. And then the Bodyguards. So these you can attach to either your senior officers or to your squads, your platoon or Cadian command squads. You have the Ogryn or the Nork Dead Dog. If you take the Ogryn, they can take Bulgren Plate, so they do gain a save characteristic of 4, and they have access to the various shields as well. So you can build them however you want and have them as your kind of generic Nork Dead Dog bodyguard. But he's still in the book as well, which is cool. It's nice to see him continue his saga in the Guard. Infantry squads. Again, you do have 4 troops choices in the book. So you've got the Infantry Squad, the Cadian Shock Troops, Death Corps of Krieg, and the Catachan Jungle Fighters. The baseline one, the Infantry Squad, these haven't really changed much. Same sort of options they've always had. Predominantly las guns, 1 special weapon, 1 heavy weapon. Options for things like the Voxcaster, and that's your lot. They've not fundamentally changed. Cadian Shock Troops are obviously a new addition. It's a variant on the Infantry Squad. You lose the option for a heavy weapon, but you gain a second special weapon. But you cannot select the same weapon more than twice. However, you can only select 2, so it's just standardised copy-paste wording here. Nothing particularly exciting. But yeah, you could have 2 melter guns, 2 plasma guns, 2 grenade launchers, 2 flamers, and still have a Voxcaster. You'd also have the option for the drum-fed auto gun, which is rapid fire 2 rather than rapid fire 1. Other than that, the same as the las gun. Only on the Sergeant, but you know, it might be a nice way of adding some variety to your unit. Death Corps of Krieg, these are quite cool. They have the Death Corps rules. They have the minor version of Transhuman, 1s and 2s to wound always fail regardless of any abilities. So these guys are going to be quite tough to shift off of objectives. Again, you can have up to 2 special weapons in the unit, so very similar to the Shock Troopers in that regard. You can have a Power Sword on the Watchmaster, so essentially whatever you can build from the Kill Team kit you can have in this. So you can have the Medic Pack, you can have the box, you can have a Sniper Rifle, which you can't have in the other units. So yeah, essentially build a Kill Team, deploy it on the table. You're not going to be shortchanged by that. The Jungle Fighters, these are again kind of more in line with the standard Infantry Squad. They just get the Catachan Jungle Fighters rule. So 6 is to hit in melee, score an additional hit basically. Other than that, for every 5 models you can have a Flamer, and you can have a Voxcaster. So you don't have access to Plasma, Melter, Sniper, Grenade Launchers. You only have Flamers in your Jungle Fighter units now, which I'm guessing is in line with the plastic kit still. I remember them only having a Flamer back in the day. So essentially the plastic kit builds, the rules provide. Sly Marbo, really cool model. I love the model for him now. The new version is great. The Ripper Pistol is nice. Strength 5, AP -2, damage 2, ignore Lookout Sir, 6 is to wound and mortal wounds. And the Envenom Blade has damage 2 against non-vehicles at strength 6. That's pretty nice. You can set him up in ambush still and deploy him 9 inches away. And once per battle at the end of the fight phase, you can pull him off the board, even if he was in engagement range of somebody, and then set him up in your next turn. Kassakin, obviously these are based on the Into the Dark one, and very similar to the Death Corps of Krieg. Essentially whatever you can build as a kill team, you can play on the table, so you haven't got to worry about building an illegal unit if you build the kill team, which is quite a nice, refreshing kind of weight off the mind. I'm looking forward to building mine. They will go into my homebrew regiment at some point. again, you have the same kind of no special weapon more than twice, the difference here being up to four Kasrkin can have special weapons. So you could have 2 melter, 2 plasma, but you couldn't do 4 melter, for example. You do have the option of having the sniper rifle, you do have option of the Voxcaster and the melter mine, so all of the kill team options can be carried across into the table. Regimental Preacher, kind of similar to how he always was. He's very much a melee buffing unit. You won't see him, I don't think, in a huge number of armies. You might see him tagging along with Kathachans. But yeah, fairly lackluster. But he is cheap and he's a nice elite choice. So if you were doing something similar to my plan of doing an infantry company of 12 infantry units, and you need the brigade detachment, he's a cheap way of filling out those elite slots to get you into that without spending CP on double detachment. Sergeant Harker, again, don't think he's changed a huge amount. Strength 5, toughness 4, 4 wounds, assault heavy bolter. He allows 1 Kathachan jungle fighter unit to reroll hit rolls of a 1, so his own unit basically. Obviously you can't attach him anymore because of 9th edition rules, but he has his own unit that he can buff up. He can never be your warlord because he's a Kathachan sergeant, and he gains a 5-up shrug against all damage. He can also issue orders, which is quite cool, but he can only issue orders to Kathachan jungle fighters, and Regimental Tactics only applies to other Kathachan jungle fighters, so you can't just give him an order to Death Corps of Krieg, it can only be to his own people. Engine Seers, yeah, repair vehicles, nothing really to write home about there. Pretty tasty melee weapon, but only 2 attacks. Strength 4 base, so strength 6 with his axe, strength 8 with his servo arm. But yeah, unless you're playing an armoured company, I'm not sure I'd bother taking him. Militarum Servitors, again, they go with the Engine Seer, they make him just give him some protection. You can give them weaponry, and as long as they're within range of the Engine Seer, their weapon skill and ballistic skill go to 4 rather than 5, and they don't take up a battlefield slot if you have an Engine Seer. The Commissar I'm really excited about, partly because the new model is gorgeous, I really like the new model, but they can now give orders, they have the Perfectus orders, which is very cool. And they do still have the summary execution rules, so you can automatically pass attrition, combat attrition. Interestingly, it doesn't say you remove a model, so he doesn't actually kill anybody anymore to get that. It's just once per turn a friendly unit passes combat attrition. Doesn't pass morale, just combat attrition. So the 1 model still flees, which I'm assuming is the model he summarily executes, but you don't have to worry about rolling 1s and 2s after that. Equally, for each commandant or command squad, you can have a commissar without using a force org slot. If you're playing infantry heavy, I don't think people will use that rule for the sole reason I mentioned about the Preacher, about filling your elite slots, but it's a nice one to have if you're playing a smaller detachment or if you're taking a lot of armour. Ogrins, Wall of Muscle, they're still tough. You subtract 1 from damage characteristics, their wounds are 3 each, their toughness 5. They can also fire their Ripper guns in melee, which is quite cool. So basically treat them like pistols at Assault 3, Strength 5, AP -2, Damage 2. And then you have the Bullgrins, which is the more heavily armoured version. They don't have the ability to fire their grenade launchers in combat, as you'd probably expect. But they do have the option to take the Mauls and the Brute Shields or the Slab Shields. Slab Shields now give you a 2-up armour save, Brute Shields are a 4-up invulnerable. And they still have the -1 damage. So they're your ones that are going to withstand a ridiculous amount of fire, and sticking a Commissar next to those with the OBSEC order is not a bad way to spend, 8 power, so what's that, about 160 points? The Ratlings, nice way of getting some snipers into the list. I wouldn't expect too much from them, they're only damage 1, wounds of a 6, 1 mortal wound. They can infiltrate around the board, you can deploy them anywhere 9 inches away from the enemy. Once per turn after you've shot, you can make a normal move. You can do this after resolving Overwatch as well, if you shoot an Overwatch and then reposition, your opponent can select a new target for the charge, but it does mean you can kind of harry them away from the enemy. If there's no one else for them to charge, they waste the charge. And then naturally stealthy, subtract 1 from the hit roll. If you're in cover, you get an additional +1 to your armor save, so you're on a 4-up save in combat in cover. The Rough Riders, I'm really excited for these. The models are lovely, they're nice and quick, they're a good flanking force if you're playing things like Tempest or even match play and need something to go and get an objective in a hurry on turn 1. This is probably going to be your go-to unit, either this or Scout Sentinels. The Goad Lance is quite fun. Strength 6, AP -3, damage 2, and if you each successful hit scores an additional hit, and if you're targeting a vehicle, they suffer 1 mortal wound in addition to normal damage. That's a really strong option. The hunting tip with the frag or melter. This one you have the frag, which scores an additional 2 hits for each successful hit, and the melter, which is just a high strength, high damage, decent AP. Of the 3, I think the Goad Lance is genuinely the best option. You don't have the flexibility of doing a mass hit with the frag tip, but yeah, it's only one in 5 that can have the Goad Lance, unsurprisingly. But I think you take at least 1 on every unit, and the Sergeant can have a power saber as well, which is basically a power sword. Horsemasters, they also get to ignore modifiers to move, advance and charge, and in the fight phase if you charged you add 2 to the strength characteristic of model, so you're at strength 8 on the charge basically with the Goad Lance or the melter tip, which is quite tasty. The Scout and the Armoured Sentinels, as I covered in the model, I'm pretty sure if you built the model as a Scout you could just drop the Armoured Carapace over the top, so you can easily have either option. They're the same power cost, I'm assuming they're around the same points cost as well. The only difference is really being that the Armoured Sentinel has a better save, same number of wounds, same toughness. The Armoured Sentinels are also slower at 8 inches rather than 12. Weapons options are identical. The difference being in the abilities. You can set up Scout Sentinels 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone and enemy models, whereas the Armoured Cockpit increases your save by 1 against damage 1 weapon, so 2-up save against damage 1. Both are quite handy. The new model is a bit Marmite as far as I can tell. I'm not a massive fan of it compared to the old model, but it does fit within the range. It does look like it'll look in place with things like the new Rogal Dawn. So just down to personal choice whether you prefer it to the old one. Hellhounds are still cool. The Ken Cannon D3+3, Flame Cannon, the Inferno Cannon 2d6. And again, because these all have the turret weapon rule, they will have the +1 to hit as well, so they're at BS3 on their top bracket. Although the Inferno Cannon obviously automatically hits, as does the Ken Cannon. Melter Cannon still has the D6+4 at close range, D6+2 standard, and can take armor tracks in a Dozer Blade, regimental tactics and explodes. The Rogal Dawn, the new kid on the block, 14 power. He's a pricey boy, but he is chonky. He's not particularly fast at movement 10, degrading down to a 6 at bottom profile, but he is 17 wounds at toughness 9 and a 2-up save. Weapons options are pretty substantial. Highlight for me is probably the Oppressor Cannon. Strength 10, AP -3, damage 4, blast with a turret weapon, so hitting on 3s on top bracket. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. I think this is going to be a lot of fun to play with. I'm looking forward to potentially adding one to a list fairly soon. Heavy weapon squads and field ordnance. Heavy weapon squads are basically the same as they were. They've not particularly changed. The field ordnance, however, is obviously the new unit. I went through the options for magnetization in the unboxing video. If you've not seen that, please do check that out. But yeah, some really good options here. I think the Bombast Field Gun wins for me because it's an indirect weapon of heavy D6, strength 7, AP2 minus damage 2. But the Heavy Las Cannon is a great anti-armor option. 2 shots with D3+3 damage at -4 and strength 10. I can very well see some Heavy Las Cannons making it onto the field. Demon Rush Battle Tanks down to 9 power. Solid stat line, they're up to toughness 8. They're 13 wounds with a 2-up save. Same turret weapons as before. All of the turret weapons have had an increase, as I covered in the Tank Commander. I'm really excited to see them kind of get their shine on the table again. A mate of mine plays a full armoured company, and I'm really excited for him to get to play these in the new edition. Basilisks, yeah, these have had a bit of an improvement. The Earthshaker Cannon is now D6+3 and blast and can shoot out of line of sight still. Whether that justifies them being included in lists again, I'm not sure. Time will tell. Interestingly, has a heavy flamer as standard, not a heavy bolter. Does have the option to replace with a heavy bolter, but the flamer is the standard option for whatever reason. The Hydra, you get a nice little buff against aircraft, so you make 2 hit rolls instead of 1 and add 1 to hit rolls as well. So it's heavy 8 but heavy 16 effectively against aircraft. That's going to put a dent in whatever flyer the enemy takes, especially at strength 7, damage 2, -2 AP. BS is only 4, but obviously 3s against aircraft, which is nice. I think these will become kind of not necessarily a staple, but if you have a flyer heavy meta, I would absolutely be taking one. Manticore, again, had a bit of an increase. The rockets now D6 +3 blast, but you can only fire 4 times per battle, same as before. The rockets themselves, strength 9, -2, damage 3. That's not bad, and you're getting up to 9 shots per rocket. As far as I can tell, full payload's gone, so you can't max that out, but it is blast, so, you know, swings and roundabouts. Does also have the squadron keyword, so you could play, as far as I can tell, you could play the order for counting models in a unit as double their count for blast, so a 5-man unit's taking 9 shots. The Wyvern, 4d6 shots with blast, again squadron, so you can give it the order. So putting down, you know, 24 hits against a 5-man unit is going to put some work in. I think they've had a bit of an improvement. I'm excited to see these. I quite like the little stub barrels on them. I think they're quite a cool unit, so it'd be good to see them in the game. The Death Strike, the one that got teased with the Godspear missile. Excitingly, that's only one of the 3 missile modes it can have. All have the same firing target mechanism that was shown off on Warcom, but the options for the missile you basically pick after you've seen your opponent's army, so there's no kind of surprise. You don't end up bringing a dud missile to a game, and all of them are pretty good. The Godspear got shown off on Warcom, massive mortal wounds within a blast mark, a radius of the detonation point. The Plasma, roll 1d6 for each unit within d3 plus 6 inches, subtracting 1 if it's a character. d3 plus 1 mortal wounds on a 2 to 3, 2d3 mortal wounds on a 4 to 5, and d3 plus 3 mortal wounds on a 6. This one has a much wider range. It's not within 3 inches of the centre, so this is your larger blast plasma, and designed for clearing out multi-wound models. And then you have the Vortex, which is still there. The damage profile for this is basically the same as the plasma. The difference being that on a 6, rather than taking d3 plus 3, you take 2d3. Other than that, it's very similar to the plasma. However, the Vortex can stay in play on a 4-up, so you can end up with this little Vortex on the battlefield, which is quite cool and touches back on the original rules for it. Chimera, mostly unchanged. Again, turret weapons hitting on 3s. Other than that, it is what it is. It's a Chimera. Interestingly, it has the mobile command vehicle rule. So in the command phase, officers embarked within the transport can issue an order, and the measurement is done from the transport. You can only issue 1. So if you have a senior officer in the transport, you lose an order. But your platoon command squads can sit in a Chimera and issue orders all day long and have no penalty, basically, which is quite cool. The Taurox Prime is solely a Scion unit. It's included in the Scion section at the back. The standard Taurox is generic guard. Has armoured tracks as standard, so you get 2-up save against damage 1 weapons. Carry 10 models, has the autocannon. Can have an extra storm bolter, but that's the only options it has, really. Doesn't have much else available to it. The Valkyrie has the Aeronautica Imperialis and Militarum Tempestus rules, so you can take it in a full Tempestus army without losing your troop scions, which is cool. Grab shoot insertion is still there, still works pretty much as it did before, as far as I can tell. Aegis Defense Line is in the Codex. It's a 2 power upgrade. Deploy it as if it was terrain. Gives you defense line, light cover, heavy cover, and defensible. And each time a ranged attack is allocated to a model while it's receiving cover, you reduce the AP of that attack by 1 as well. So not only do you get +1 save from the light cover, you also reduce the AP of the incoming damage, which is very cool. Also, it looks like this is a new variant of the Aegis Defense Line model. I've not seen this before. It's definitely not the old style one, and it's not the double-sided sandbagged one, so it looks like we're getting a new defense line, which is quite cool. All of the super heavy options are in here: the Baneblade, the Stormlord, Hellhammer. I won't dwell on these too much. I think there's a lot to dig into, and we're already at nearly an hour in the video. The one I will point out, though, is the Shadow Sword. The Volcano Cannon is an absolute monster. It's heavy D3 plus 3 shots, 18 strength, minus 5 AP, and 12 damage. This thing can very easily one-shot basically any unit on the table, unless it has a wound cap on it. It also has the turret weapon rule, even though it's not technically a turret, so you're hitting on 3s at full bracket. And it has the blast rule as well, so if you're hitting against, for example, a unit of 5 models, it does have the regimental keyword, so you can give it orders, so you can make the unit of 5 into a unit of 10 for the purposes of blast, and easily put down, that's 6 dead Space Marines, no matter which way you cut it. Really, really excited for that. The damage 12 is just awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing what that does against other super heavies. The Tempestus, as I say, these have had a bit of a trim. You don't have kind of the various unit options anymore. You have command squads, and you have Scion squads, and that's it. These will obviously become troops in a full Scion army. Other than that, you're an elite's choice. You drop into a standard Militarum army. Don't seem to have changed a huge amount, so I won't really dwell on them. But as I say, you have just lost a few of those options that you had previously. You do get an order. Hit rolls of a 6 are an additional hit for both the command squad and for the Scions, so you can put down quite a large number of hits with their rapid fire weaponry. And they can aerial deploy without a flyer, so you can still deep strike them in any army. Taurox Prime, as I say, is Scion only. Nothing really seems to have changed there either, as far as I can tell. Again, you can only have 1 per unit of Scions, or Tempestus infantry, sorry. Fairly standard, nothing really to write home about. On to the bit that I am most excited about, the Crusade rules. I've been reading these over and over the last few days, and I just love them. Of all the book, of all of its flaws, of all the weird subtractions of units, not being able to build platoons properly as far as I'm concerned, a lot of that is forgiven because of the Crusade rules. What you effectively do is you send your guard army on a tour of duty. So you line it up to begin with. You roll 2d3 for how many battles you need to fight, how long your war is going to be, and d3 plus 2 for your number of victories. So you only have to win, on average, about half your games to complete a tour of duty, which feels very Imperial Guard. But after each battle you can gain commendation points. Before you go out on your tour of duty, you assign your logistics points, and you can each one of these gives you a surplus or a deficiency. So there are 4 categories and you have 4 points. If you give everything 1 point, you get no bonuses but suffer no penalties. You have a nice balanced kind of assignment of morale and material. However, you can create a deficiency in one of these and gain a surplus in another, and you can do that as much as you want. You could do 2 surplus and 2 deficiency, or 1 surplus and 1 deficiency. Some of these look like they could be a lot of fun. If you have military intelligence, you get an additional CP as a surplus, but if you have a deficiency, each time you issue an order on a 1, the order isn't issued, and at the end of the battle you only gain a requisition if you win. So there's a quite a heavy deficiency there if you do decide to lower it down. This feels very much like the logistics of running a military, running an army in obviously very high level terms, but it's a really nice touch into how you play the game from a narrative sense. The bit that I love most though is the campaign medals. So as you play games you gain commendation points, and you spend commendation points to give units medals. You quite literally have Tier medals at the end of a tour of duty. And some of these are really powerful as well. Decoration of Duty gives you an extra battle trait. Star of Fidelity, if you have a Commandant model, you're counted as being within the senior officer range, so the reroll ones to hit within 24 inches. I think that would be the first medal that anyone takes in a Guard army, to be honest. But yeah, it's a really nice way of showing what the Imperial Guard is like, how they give merit, but you do have to earn it through play. You get 1 commendation point per battle, and the agendas give you extras. The agendas are cool. Things like Inspired Command, keep a tally for your officers, they gain experience for successfully issuing orders. Propagandist Coup, you have to go and destroy the big things in the enemy army to show them the Imperial Guard isn't scared of anybody. Yeah, just really nice agendas that fit the nature of the Imperial Guard. The requisitions are a bit limited maybe. You've only got the 1 page of them, but things like Uplifting Primers, gain extra experience, and yeah, you can play the Insane Bravery on Platoon Infantry for 1 CP. just to show that they've had a bit of a morale boost. Consolidated regiments, you can change your regimental doctrines. For once it's free, and any time after that is two requisition. So if your force has been battered and broken, you want to add in some new paint jobs from a different regiment, you could play that for 0 RP and change your doctrines to show the new regiment you've got to. Tank case, obviously you can't start with upgrades on units in Crusade, so tank case allows you to get the tank case option. And then decorated officer is your you bring in an officer with experience. They come in at a blooded rank, things like that. The Crusade relics, these are quite cool as well. A lot of them touch back to kind of previous characters, things like the Medal Macaria, Petrov's Mark 45, which is the old Valhamma one. Some of these I think I can see seeing a use. It depends on what you want out of your guard, really. Personally, I think I'd probably stick to battle traits and things like that rather than relics, but that's just me. And then you've got a double-page name generator with different regiments, and then tank names as well, and a couple of showcases. One of which is an armoured company, which is quite nice. It's good to see them getting some love. And Chris Peach's absolutely beautiful Ventrillon regiment. I love these guys so much. They're so 40k with their plumed helmets, based on the kind of Mordian style regimental doctrines, and Sharp's rifles at the back there. Beautiful, beautiful army. You should be very proud of those. It's very cool to see. And that's it, everybody. I won't go into the reference section for now. I'm sure that the points will be covered in other videos by other people. As I say, as an overview, I think this book gets a lot right. I really do. The Crusade rules in particular are fantastic. The regimental doctrines are brilliant. The way that orders work is fantastic. I just feel like there are some key units in how the Guard play that I would have liked to have seen if you're doing a generic regiment. And I really would have loved to have seen something like the 5th edition platoon structure come back. As it is, though, I'm really excited to get my Guard back on the table and bring the Hammer of the Emperor against the enemies of mankind. If you've got any thoughts, any comments, any feedback, please do leave it in the comment section below. But other than that, lovely to see you all, and hopefully see you again soon. Thanks, bye!